Thank you, Nick. Yeah, we'll get back to that Thor thing after, over a beer. So, have you guys conducted user research before? Show of hands. Yes. Never conducted, show of hands. Never conducted, very few, okay. I hate raising hands, show of hands. Ah, okay, that's where the rest is. Okay, good. So, this talk is for you if you are intending to talk to your users, if you've already done it and you want to hopefully learn a bit and hear some tips and get better at it. As a US researcher, I've run various studies, and there's something that always happens, and it's that users lied to me. And for years, I've been trying to find out why. And there have been ups and downs in my career because of that question. And at the moment, so it's 2021, and I'm going to share with you what I've learned so far. So why do your users lie to you? The clicker is not working. No? Should we? I'll just do it this way. Here you go. That's why users lie to you. That's what I found out. Because they want to feel good about themselves. And now I've given this talk before, and then I made this great joke and said, so now this is officially the shortest talk of the whole conference, and you can all go. And everyone just looked at me. They're like, that wasn't a funny joke. So I was like, okay, fine, I'm not going to do it again. Stay seated, because yes, there are more slides, of course. I have more information about it. And I'm going to start with a little story. So this is Valerie. Valerie's my niece. At this time, she was about 7 years old. And she had a soccer tournament. And I drove her to the soccer tournament, couldn't find a parking spot. So I dropped her off, and I said, hey, do you know where the entrance is? I'll come out, like, as soon as I've parked the car, I'm going to come. And she's like, yeah, of course, I've been here before. I know where the entrance is. So I drop her off, go park the car, come back to the same corner, and there she stands crying. And I felt so bad. I was like, Valerie, what happened? Like, did you not find the way? What happened? She's like, no, I knew where I was going. I thought I'll come back. I was like, okay. So we start walking. I was like, yeah, look, it's just here. Like, and she's like, yeah, I came all the way to here, but then I wasn't sure if I have to turn left or right. And I was like, oh, that's okay. We turn right, we walk along here. And then she's like, yeah, actually, I did know it. I did walk here. But then, you know these trees over there? So my friend Emma says that these trees are super dangerous. And one time, we were walking under a tree like that, and then the branches fell down. And I was like, okay. So maybe, should we try to walk past the trees? She's like, yeah, we can do it. So we walk past the trees. And then the best part happens. We come past, these are like the change rooms of the school. And you have to kind of walk around to get into the change rooms. She's like, yeah, I walked past here as well before. It's like, oh, you came all the way here before. She's like, yeah, I did it. But last time I was here, my dad and we climbed through the windows so we could get into the change room faster. I was like, okay. Now, her dad is not really a climb through a window kind of guy. he's a bit big. It's not like, yeah, like the whole way. Of course, I knew like she was not telling the truth. And what Valerie did is exactly what I experienced in user research. In countless like usability tests and interviews, people kind of fudge the truth a bit. They start to come up with stories. Then they start to justify these stories, and they kind of contradict previously made explanations, and a lot happens while they're sitting there talking to you about your product, about your ideas, and so on. And most people lie only to the point where they can still feel good about themselves. They don't lie just to kind of lie and be a bad person. Like research has shown, it only goes up to a point where I can kind of still live with myself. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to talk to you a bit first about how we deceive ourselves. There's some about human biases, what we do to deceive ourselves. It's not about deceiving others. It really is about what we do for ourselves. And obviously, I don't want you to leave all depressed and never do research anymore. We're going to also talk about what we can do about it. So this first part, we're going to leave out all the bits around social desirability and all those things that you've probably heard of, which is about, oh, it's a lab situation and it's an artificial situation and that's why people lie. This is really about people themselves. And it starts with a term that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And if you're not, I'm going to give you a little example. So cognitive dissonance is kind of that uneasy feeling you get when you're doing something and it's a bit countering your belief, and then you do a bit more, and then you get that uneasy feeling that it's actually not really, like you're maybe confronted with a mistake that you've made, it's just maybe just contradicting information you get, and it's that uneasy feeling that you get, for example, when you pirate a show. So let's say you're there, like a few years ago, it would have been, oh, you go and you like illegally download something. No one does that anymore. But we borrow each other's Netflix login. And when we borrow each other's Netflix login and we don't live in the same household, that's not the terms of service of Netflix. We're not supposed to do that. We're all pirates. And what we can do is we can be like, oh my God, I'm such a bad person. I have done something terrible. I'm stealing from Netflix. And people are going to lose their jobs because artists are not going to get paid and so on. Or I can say, well, you know what? My friends have paid for it. Well, you know what? Netflix earns enough money. Oh, and I have a Disney Plus subscription. And I have this other thing. So we're all starting to self-justify about why we're doing this. And we start to kind of feel better about ourselves through that action. And the reason why cognitive dissonance is often shown as kind of almost like a pyramid, and you slide down one way of the pyramid, is that the further down you slide, the further you tell yourself that, the further away you get from the bad pirate. And the more you're that feeling starts to be like, that's like, I'm just going to stay here on this side and I'm not going to allow the other sides. So congratulations, you guys are all superheroes. We all are. And our superpower is self-justification. So we're really, really good at this. We can kind of come up with the most creative ways and explanations about what we do something. It's a very, very creative process. And what's happening is that there are a lot of biases at play, obviously. When we deceive ourselves, when we react to things. This is not a psychology lecture, but I do want to show you some examples that I think are very important in terms of biases, because it's very important to spot them in your users when you talk to them or when you observe them. The first example is about the averaging bias. So averaging is nothing else than just basically trying to estimate a rough number of what you think has done. And averaging also often means that you kind of take the last thing that happens and you kind of average up or down based on what recently happened. And so I conducted a research for a gambling prevention program, and we went to the casino to interview people and observe people for a new program, and they were all loyalty members of the casino, so they all had a loyalty card. And as an intro question, we asked them, how often do you come to the casino? Because it's a warm-up, it's a nice conversation starter. We didn't really need to ask the question because we had their membership data. We knew how often they were at the casino. Now, who can guess what happened? They what? They lied. They lied. And what did they say? How often do they go to the casino? Very, very rarely, of course. Exactly. So what they did is so overall we had a lot of participants, and it was roughly half the numbers of what we saw. So it was like if someone said, if we saw someone is there 5 days a week, they usually said 2 to 3 days a week. So it was like throughout, it was roughly half of like their number that they stated was roughly half of what we had on record for them. And it was really amazing because, as you can all understand, like this is not a comfortable thing to talk about. How often do I gamble? How often am I here? So what do? We usually average down. So when you ask questions about how often do you do something, you think it's the most simple question, but we need to be aware that people average down when it's something not so comfortable. Now, what do you think is going to happen when I ask, so how often do you go to the gym? all the time. So, yeah, in a similar setup to the casino, we did this at the gym as well, and we did the entry-level question around how often do you go to the gym? We did have their membership data, and either they somehow, like, in the night, snuck into the gym through the window, like my niece, or I don't know what happened, but obviously they stated much higher numbers than what we actually saw in the membership data. And it's very normal, because it's normal also, it's the person we want to be. If usually I make it to the gym once a week, and last week I ended up going twice or maybe 3 times, what am I going to say if someone asks me, how often do you go to the gym? I usually say, well, twice, 3 times a week. It's who we want to be. And we just made it like last week this way. So we are this person at the moment. So it's not like we're really lying, but we're just fudging the truth a bit. And it makes us feel good. And it's how often we want to go in the next few days. And it's just important, that difference between like understanding who do they want to be, who they really are. Is it even important? Maybe it's not even important. Maybe you can just ask, like, how often do you want to go to the gym? And then look at that. And a similar thing we noticed and we saw was in some research we've done lately with Migros. When you ask nowadays, what kind of products do you buy? Then obviously very important is, I buy organic. I buy sustainable products, I buy local products. This is important to me. And so we like always heard these people talk about, yeah, I buy all these organic things, and like especially with meats, the poor animals, I buy organic meat. But then when we go into their, so when we get them to log in and they are in their account, very comfortable at Migros, you then see your most bought products, super convenient. You can buy them again, very great. And what happens is we see their most bought products. Now, all of you who are not Swiss and not familiar with Migros will not get the joke that just happened there. This is the private label, cheap brand. Animals are probably not treated so well, but it's much, much cheaper. And so this is what happened. We see that the people, what they're actually doing is obviously not reflecting what they say they want to do and who they want to be. Now, do we have any data scientists who do want to raise their hands? Anyone working in web analytics? Anyone who likes web analytics? No? Because I thought, oh, they're the ones who are going to be like, because what they're going to say is like, that's not a problem. We're just going to look into the data. We can always see what people are doing. We don't need to do this like fuzzy user research, like do you feel me kind of thing. We just look into the data, then we see what people are doing. But we also know that when we look at the data, we get the what. When we talk to people, when we observe them, we get the why. And a lot of times it's much more difficult to find out the real reasons behind something rather than just seeing what it is that they are doing. And for all of you who are strong believers in the 5 why idea and in this, yeah, we just need to ask them why and then we get all the answers and it's super easy, I have really bad news for you. So here is like the worst part of my user research career. 2014, I read a paper from Peter Johansson, and I look at his research, and it's the most like devastating thing. I wanted to quit my job. He finds out, he does this experiment. He gives people 2 pictures, like let's say little straight hair guy, little curly hair woman. He asks, so which one do you like better? And then people say, curly-haired woman. So he takes away the picture, and because he's like a fun little magician, he kind of magically takes the wrong picture, so the person said curly head, he takes up the straight head, and he says, so why did you pick this? And he didn't do this with every single pair of faces, but he did it with quite a few, and only 1/3 of the swaps were actually noticed. People started to explain why they picked the person, even though that's not who they picked. They started to rationalize. And when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go do something else for work. What are we going to do with this? Because it was so devastating. And he actually replicated the whole thing with, in the context of a social or in a politics like survey. And like it was quite robust, because initially my initial reaction was confirmatory bias. Oh no, this can't be true. I'm sure there was some mistake in this. And so he did that again, and it was just, yeah, it was devastating for me. And so what I learned from it, though, is that we can still ask why, but we obviously need to be much, much more clever about it. And this leads me to the second part. Now the optimistic part. What can we do about it? My favorite model to start designing user research and to kind of understand how we should actually structure our research is this one. And now I have a few former students here that are now going to be able to, they're all like, oh, please don't make me say it. So we actually looked at this model in class again and again. Anyone who will listen to me, I will explain to them this model because I love it so much. So what it says is that it comes from market research. It's actually like market researchers have been using it for years. It's 1975, so when you go home and you're like, what did you learn? You can say, oh, we looked at the Fishbein model from 1975. And what it says is that we have attitudes toward a thing. We can say, my attitude towards health is, oh yeah, it's very important. My attitude towards smoking is, it's terrible or it's great. We have social and subjective norms. This is more like what my friends say, what is normal in the environment that I'm usually acting in. And so what we look at when we interview people, and that's also what market research, like the theory always said, it's like, look at the attitude and the social and subjective norms, and you will find out a predictor of what they want to do. So it kind of it kind of shapes the behavior intention. So this shapes what they actually want to do. Organic meat is very good, is very important. Social subjective norms, like everyone says I should buy organic because of the poor animals. Behavior intention, I should go buy organic meat. And then I stand there and there's a big step to actually then picking the organic meat because the other one is on sale. And so anyone who's trying to like stop smoking will know exactly that gap between behavior intention and the actual behavior. There are so many moments where the behavior intention has not translated to a behavior. And that is exactly the problems with a lot of things we do when we just talk about things. And so why do I use this to structure research? Is that I say, okay, when we do interviews, when you do surveys, we can talk about this. We can ask questions about this. But then we get the behavior through usability tests and observations, and really separating the two and saying, this is what I can find out here, and this is what I can find out here, and not mixing the two up. So that's tip number one. Now, tip number two also comes with a little story from Australia. This is a tissue processor. It's when someone cuts out something like a mole from you or some kind of tissue and you need to get a biopsy. It goes through this tissue processor. And it's super important that the tissue processor has these reagents. That's the bottles you see in the bottom there. And the makers of this machine had a problem. They came to us and they said, hey, we have a lot of so-called unintended behavior. We have a lot of times where people are not doing with the machine what they're supposed to do, and we have no idea why. Like there's a lot of problems with faults, with damaged tissues, and we know that the reagent is not the way that the machine it thinks it is. And the reason for that was that when you need to do a bottle change, when you need to change the reagent, there's a dialogue that comes up. And yes, it's very difficult to understand, right? So what people need to do is they need to change the reagent in a bottle, they slip it back in, and then this dialogue comes, and then they need to say, yes, I've changed it. Now what happens a lot of times is that anyone of you who has used the printer with toner knows this trick. Machine is saying, hey, this bottle needs to be changed, so what am I going to do? I'm going to take it out, I'm just going to shake it a bit, I'm going to put it back in, and then I'm going to say, yes, I've changed it. Now with the printer, yeah, that's not too bad. With a tissue embedder like this, that can actually be pretty bad. If the machine then thinks that the reagent is much more pure than it actually is, it can really destroy the tissue. So we're talking about some real serious issues here. And we've done user research where we were in those labs and we watched people do it, and we watched people press kind of the wrong button. And a lot of times when we asked them, they said, "Oh, I'm not quite sure. Like I'm not quite sure what it like. Yeah, it's probably, yeah. When I read it again, yeah, probably. Well, I was going to kind of do it later," or they were just kind of for them. So if you could tell, it's not even that they were like, "Oh, I'm cheating the system here." It's just that they could hide behind this kind of convoluted copy here and behind this like, what is it exactly asking? I don't really understand it, but I know when I click changed, I can run my next run. And so that's what they did. Like that's what they learned. And what we've then done is we've done a simple change. This is the wireframe that we initially tested, the very first one. And we just changed the copy. We didn't change any of the flows. We just changed the copy. And we said, "What did you do?" And then they had to say, "I changed the entire bottle," or "I did no change," or "I topped it up." Like kind of, these were the three options. We didn't change the options. We didn't change any of the flow. It was really just the question. And when we then user tested it, the bad news was still not all of them actually changed the bottle. But at least what they now did is, first of all, they said, "Well, I'm just going to lie." And so they were conscious of it, said, "Oh, I'm going to change the entire bottle." And then they started to write a note for the next one in the shift or for themselves that they still need to change this bottle. And so all of a sudden, because this was conscious, it was no longer this kind of, "Oh, I don't know what the machine is doing, I'm just going to do whatever." It was kind of, they now understood it. Like there was no excuse not to understand what option they actually picked. And so with this simple interface change, people could actually no longer pretend that they didn't understand. And that already helped a lot. And this brings me kind of to the last bit, because we've talked a lot about kind of qualitative research, asking people, watching people. But we have so many surveys. So many people do all these surveys. And it's always so tough to give advice on it, because I find it's actually really difficult to get good data out of surveys. But one thing that I want to encourage you is that you stop making your life so easy with surveys. There's a lot of situations where we just want a yes or a no. And so what do? We ask the user yes or no. A lot of times the user's real answer is, "It depends," or, "Well, it's a few shades of gray." And so a lot of times when they fill out surveys, they don't really take it seriously, because we all have NPS fatigue, like you have to give feedback to like every single interaction, talk to someone on the phone, "How was it? You went to the airport toilet, how was it?" Like you have to like again and again give feedback. So people are not that excited about it anymore. And so at least what you can do is you can craft the answer options a bit better, and then you need to do the work. So one thing we've done, for example, we asked schoolgirls. We needed to know if the teachers actually gave them a leaflet. And so we asked schoolgirls, we couldn't just ask them, "So did the teacher give you the leaflet?" Or did they had to do a leaflet and like a bit of an information about it. And we could have just asked all the students, "Hey, did they give you the leaflet? Yes, no, done." But what we found out in the qualitative interviews is that they were like, "Oh, I'm not sure. Hold on, yeah, I think they put something down," or, "Oh yeah, like mine actually talked about it," or they're like, "Oh, I think I forgot." And so we started to give them all these options. In the end, we can still do the reporting on yes, no, like did the teachers do their job, but the students had much more options to actually say the truth, because they didn't, if we just asked yes and no outright, a lot of them would have just been, "Don't know, yes, no, don't know." And so we get bad data. And I find, yes, it takes much longer to craft those, but I'd rather have a shorter survey and less data than bad data, and bad decisions made out of these bad data. And so that's why I find a lot of times it's actually worth spending that extra effort. So when we talk about surveys, and when we talk about generally asking questions, one mistake that I see a lot is this idea of, "So what would you do if?" So we kind of take people in a hypothetical future. We ask them things like, "How much would you pay for this? Look at this cool feature, how much would you pay for this?" Or, "Look at this great new option, would you use it?" And it's kind of taking them into the future. Now you can do that in usability tests when you really take them and launch them into that future and you say, okay, now imagine you're here and you can do all of these things. But generally it's a really, really bad idea to ask them this whole hypothetical thing. And the other way around, if this is like a timeline, also doesn't work so well. If you go too far back, why did you do something? What happened back then? What happened 3 years ago when you cross the street is really, really difficult to ask. And you need to be aware that you don't get an honest answer because memory is just such a tricky beast. Like we're just very bad at remembering things. And so it's very difficult to go too far back. And again, coming back to this why question, one thing that worked really well is if you start to ask for anecdotes. Do you remember what led to blah, blah, blah? Do you remember what triggered this moment? Can you tell me a story about it? Don't let them do all the abstract work of why is it that I am this person, but go into the stories, try to find out what happened then and what happened next, and that actually gives you a lot of the why, instead of asking it straightforward. But the best thing to do generally in surveys, but also in research I find is asking about the now. Like really asking about what is here right now. And so to sum it all up, what I really like you to take home and be optimistic about is that you can do great research by observing them instead of asking them whenever you can. I know it's not always possible, and I know some things can't be observed. But generally think about this difference, or at least be aware of it. And then for all the interface designers, all the people who can write copy, think about this. Someone I worked with was always said, accuracy is the enemy of good copy. And I love this sentence because it really is a lot of times the accuracy. Oh, but we need to be really, we need to also say this. Oh, there's a bit of also more fine print and there is a bit of more information. Yeah, but it's not quite right if we ask it like this. Try to come up with a solution where the super correct engineers, legal people, whoever talks against doing easy copy, try to find a solution that pleases them as well, but try to be more direct. Help users not hide behind a bad interface and behind bad copy. And the last one we just talked about, allow for that complexity and ask about the now. And really ask about what's happening right now, because there's a really nice quote from a book I highly recommend. Its memories are often pruned and shaped by an ego-enhancing bias that blurs the edges of past events, softens culpability, and distorts what really happened. And that's it. If you want to know more, I added some stuff to it. That's it. Ta-da!
Thank you. I have a question from Mark. How would your interviewing or testing process change if you could guarantee that the users don't lie?
Oh, that would be so cool. I think we could just be so much more straightforward. It would obviously be much easier because we could just be super straightforward. And I think this is also when, you know that moment in user research when you build the trust and you feel like, oh, this person is now trusting me, then you know you've kind of eliminated a lot of the social desirability and a lot of those biases. But those biases we just talked about, a lot of them are still in place. But yeah, it would be easy.
Here's a question. Have you ever had working situations where different people on the team read something else in what the user said? And what did you do?
Yes, all the time. Yeah, I think anyone who's done research has had this situation. And this is where the debrief becomes super interesting also. I thought they said this, but I interpret it as this. And I think there's nothing with a good discussion. Sometimes it also depends a bit where the other person is coming from. And I really look at that. For example, how much do they know? Did they have an opinion before about a certain direction, and are they trying to do this? And something I do in my, when I do the analysis, is I do my confirmatory bias parking spot. So I write down what I thought before, or what I think kind of my thesis of what I think it was true, like this icon works, or this flow works really well, or this part is really shit. I write it down and I put it on a Post-it note, and we all do that, and we put it on kind of our parking lot of that we don't want to, like, we can always kind of come back to it and be like, am I just confirming my opinion now? Am I arguing now what I've seen just based on what I thought they're going to do? Or is it really neutrally what happened or how we can interpret this? And it really helps, that kind of my own biases.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is just a spontaneous question that I had, but do you have situations like with the meat example where you're looking at the data and you see that they, they're saying, yeah, I buy bio only, but then they're confronted with the data and you're like, but dude, look, you bought the cheap stuff like all these times. Do they like,
so what is this here?
do they get defensive, or do they go into that cognitive dissonance mode, or do those situations where they're confronted like that not happen?
Yeah, I try not to confront them. It's usually a mistake by the machine. Oh, like these algorithms, yeah, they're probably not so good yet. They probably didn't get it right. They're just, So I try not to confront them too much. Yeah.
Good. This question just popped on the screen from Marcus. Is less usable data always the better option than having potential false data from too few options in a survey? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, that's usable. Where's Marcus? Where is Marcus? What do you mean by usable? Like, yes, less usable?
You probably can't use the options like it depends.
Yeah.
False or yes and no.
If you can only do that?
Yeah, you probably have less yes and no answers
Yeah.
in your survey as when you don't, when you include the it depends option.
Yeah. Well, what I often try and do is I also, obviously, the very easy trick is to say I don't know, or give at least the I don't know option. But I find that generally having accurate data is just so much more important. Like if I had to weight it, I would probably, maybe we'd come up with a use case where it's not the case. It's difficult to say never, but I would probably always go for the accurate data over the other one. Yeah. Or what did you called it something else? What did you?
It's not.
It's not. It's disappeared.
Oh yeah, it's less usable data.
Or less usable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's another question. Do users lie more in group than in a one-on-one interview?
Yes. Have you guys done stakeholder interviews where the stakeholders brought their boss? It's great, isn't it? It's like. Oh yeah, I always do it this way. Exactly like the procedure. Yes, definitely in groups. There's so much like interplay and the dominant opinion. Yeah.
What are your tips for professionals who would like to get better in the art of interviewing users?
In the art of watch yourself. Like watch your own interviews. And it's so painful, but watch yourself. I find it's the best way to learn. Like, yes, you can read a ton of books and you can do like all that work, but I find watching yourself and really dissecting, maybe even with a peer, maybe even with someone who can help you, like watches it with you, it's so powerful, like painful but powerful to go back and say, oh, this is how I asked this. Oh, wait a minute, here I asked a leading question. Or like you notice so many things yourself already. So
you're saying watch a video of yourself, so recorded the session and watch it
record
afterwards.
the session. Most sessions, or a lot of sessions are recorded anyway. But,
Do you think that interviewing users is an art or a skill?
Ooh, that's a good one. Who had that one?
Anonymous.
I hope it's a skill so we can all learn it, right? No, I don't know. Maybe it's also a bit of art, but no, I think it's a skill. I do think there's a lot of things we can learn of how to get it better. So therefore, I would hope it's a skill. Can I say I hope it's a skill?
You can say that. Yeah.
It depends.
It depends. Okay, that's our time. Thank you,
yes,
Angie
thank
Bourne.
you. Thank you, everyone.